Together, the hole in our public finances this year, which recurs every year, the compensation schemes that they did not fund, and their failure to assess the scale of the challenges facing our public services means that this budget raises taxes by £40 billion.
The government's decision to hike national insurance was without doubt one of the more contentious measures in October's budget. It has been roundly chastised by the private sector, branded a land grab, a significant burden, and having killed trust in the government by key figures in business and industry. But with less than a month before the tax hike comes into force, we wanted to dig into what the government is doing and why many in the business community have reacted to it with such consternation. It all dates back to Halloween, October the 31st, when the Chancellor arrived at Parliament carrying the famous red briefcase to deliver Labour's first budget since 2010, and indeed the first ever delivered by a woman. Her speech contained lots of popular announcements: increased money for the country's schools, a boost for NHS funding, money to help bring an end to the obdurate series of strikes that had brought the economy to a grinding halt in the preceding months. But about a third of the way through her announcement came the kicker: the revelation how all those laudable spending commitments were to be funded. A 1.2% jump in a tax that companies pay on wages they give to full-time staff, known as national insurance. The government would now look to levy the tax at 15%, and on top of that, the amount at which the tax would kick in, known as the secondary threshold, was to drop drastically from £9,100 to just £5,000. The move is expected to raise between a massive £15 and £25 billion a year by the end of the Parliament, depending on who you speak to and how businesses react. And in her speech to MPs, the Chancellor acknowledged that it was a difficult decision that would be felt beyond business. But that olive branch hasn't stopped several of the biggest figures in UK business chastising Rachel Reeves and her colleagues for not understanding business, and the government's political opponents branding it a jobs tax. At the heart of the fierce reactions have been a litany of warnings about what the move will mean for how companies are able to operate and, by extension, what it will do to the UK economy. Faced with a new cost, which is what this will be, businesses have three main options. They can either raise their prices, risking a bout of inflation in the UK economy and higher prices for consumers like me and you at the till. They can cut back on other costs by reducing things like the number of staff they employ or the amounts they spend on marketing to pay the levy, or they can swallow the cost themselves, which would eat into their profit margins and harm their ability to invest in the business going forward to make better products or train up staff. Not an easy choice, and that decision is even more painful for some than others. Bearing the brunt of the changes will be middling and larger firms that employ a lot of people on cheaper wages. Think sectors like hospitality and retail. This is because the threshold reduction represents a much larger chunk of staff's earnings than for higher paying industries. In Sainsbury's case, it recently warned that it was facing an additional annual bill of over £140 million and has since announced over 3,000 redundancies to try and keep their costs down in response. But they are not alone. City AM has reported on a spate of business surveys that have found confidence among business leaders to have plunged since October. Taking just a couple, a recent survey from the CIPD, the top HR industry body, found that over a third of businesses planned to reduce their headcounts over the coming year, while some 42% admitted they plan to raise their prices. Meanwhile, a similar business confidence audit from accountancy body, the ICAEW, found business confidence to be as low now as it was just after Liz Truss's calamitous mini-budget. But just how many of these warnings come to fruition, and the extent and manner in which the tax will affect the wallets of the average consumer, will not be made clear until the weeks and months following April the 5th. What is easier to say is that if businesses are even half right in their assessment, it won't be good.